Земля, люди-боги и мы, распятые на кресте толкования.
So now we are coming to Russia, but we have many Russian people wanting to participate in this conference in English. So but we have decided that we will dedicate this conference mostly to people of the world, to different civilizations. So, for example, if Kemisiba represents Africa, so somehow I represented this conference Russia, and we try to get the initiative to speak in the name of the adult culture, but we could not avoid two young men who are Americans, the citizens of the United States of America, but who live in Russia. They are not political refugee. They're just Americans living in Russia. So by that, we are solving the problem how to give the voice to the Russia and to United States. We will come to United States to the end of our conference. We are following time zones, as I have explained. But now, let me transmit the word to John Stachelsky, and his speech is about fourth political theory, liberalism, and subject. So that is the voice of America inside of Russia. Please, John.
So I suppose I could subtitle my talk "Fourth Political Theory Viewed from the Left." And that's kind of the angle which I've been approaching it. So liberalism had long presented itself as unassailable and natural, and in doing so, it likewise presented its internal managerial debates as the fundamental and definitional domain of the political as such, pushing its competitors together into a broadly defined extremist fringe, which serves as little more than another unsavory category for liberalism to include in its day-to-day managerial duties. For Karl Popper and those he influenced, it's not even worth making distinctions, right, between the left and the right. Their equidistant position from this like civilized center is the only thing that matters. So to paraphrase Tolstoy in the spirit of Trubetskoy, we could say that all liberalism's unhappy critics are alike, but each happy liberal is happy in his own way. This outlook is evident in critical looks at the fourth political theory in Western academic circles, where skeptical or outright hostile efforts are made to abstract and generalize the concept so that it can easily be relegated into one of these tried and trusted triad of political narratives of the last couple centuries. So generally, fourth political theory is assigned far right at birth and even defined as fascist in Western scholarship for a variety of reasons, most of which we don't have time for here or in general, really. The most palpable is likely contemporary fears regarding the revival of the radical right, a fact which has been paired with a dangerous inability to recognize the rather Protestant nebula of tendencies on the right, which has splits, divisions, sharp ideological differences. After all, many on the left and right are still fighting simply to be distinguished between one another in contemporary liberal paradigm. At the same time, here we can note a fundamental contradiction between the fourth ideology and that of the current world order, one which ironically and dialectically contradicts the stereotypes regarding either side. I would like to propose that in some way it is liberalism and not conservatism which promises, although obviously incorrectly, wholeness and purports itself to precisely coincide with some kind of natural order and makes these millenarian promises regarding universal abundance. On the other side, what is obviously not true of all oppositional conservative ideologies, The fourth political theory proposes precisely skeptical nuance, critical thought, and most critically, a political mode without a set of prefabricated tenets or ideological borders between these various ideologies. Even in those moments where those developing the fourth political theory do make seemingly express statements that might appear definitional or programmatic, the utterance itself is often more so an expression that points to deeper mechanisms that are either in radical flux or simply beyond human comprehension. This is what helps sparks the theory's radical, experimental, and creative approach to the political. To point to an example, the general line of conservatives on the question of moving beyond gender norms to gender fluidity is to declare this is a perversion of liberal ideology and move on to the next topic. However, in Professor Dugin's first book on the fourth political theory, he suggests that instead, another alternative way to think about this is we could say that conservatives also seek to move beyond a gender division, and that conservatives could seek to move through the celestial hierarchy, seek proximity to God, and that in doing so, humans are ultimately striving to be more like angels, who are God's angelic intermediaries, and all of whom are androgynous and genderless, right? So perhaps this is not like a precise definitional course of action one needs to follow, but it's rather about radically rethinking the boundaries set by the traditional meta-narratives and reshaping the concepts in a format which brings out the truths deeper than these topical day-to-day issues that have come to define the concept of the political, to express something even if it's just a small vibration of an unfathomably complex operation that's behind the scenes. So if the specific program is ultimately interchangeable in some way, what is it of an ideology that remains when we take away those day-to-day issues? And I think answering this question is likely critical to navigating postmodernism, right? So on this subject, let's think about the fact that liberalism places the individual as the universalized node of its worldview, and that the fourth political theory, as Professor Dugin has argued, we could instead think about Dasein fulfilling this role. Here, once again, there are actually some certain similarities between the liberal and the fourth political theory view. Marxism, for instance, proposes classes as subjects of history, a collective entity. And choosing Dasein, the fourth political theory puts itself in a certain proximity, and that that Dasein is also a first personal limited observing position, right? This is phenomenology. Undoubtedly, we can find through lines between Heidegger's existential thought and its liberal and left variants, namely Camus and Sartre, right? There's some level of exchange between these ideas. However, the fundamental difference is that Dasein is an attempt to strip down and negate the assumptions that have been tacked onto subjecthood. Most fundamentally are presumptions about the nature of being. Okay, that's the music for me to end. So I have a little bit more, but I'll probably post that in geopolitical. Thank you very much.
Sorry for interrupt, but we have decided about kind of timing with some exceptions. And now I will pass the word to Tim Kirby, very famous RT anchor and American intellectuals that has chosen Russia as existential territory, speaking with some postmodernists. Please, Tim.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say first off that I'm honored to be among such esteemed speakers. For those of you who don't really know much about me, which may be many of you, I've worked in the media for many years and I'm an American. So today I'm going to talk from a media standpoint and a bit from a pragmatism standpoint, because Americans are known for their pragmatism. What can I say? It is in my nature. So the first thing I'd like to say is that's interesting about the fourth political theory is that, as Alexander Gilevich called it, an invitation. And that's why we're all sitting here right now, because it's an invitation for more intellectuals, open-minded people to come and maybe think about the future. That is amazing. But what happens later? Eventually, at some point, again, from a media perspective, at some point, an invitation has to be turned into an offer, because not everyone is going to come and join the invitation. It has to be projected outward. And that's where things get hard. One media term you may have heard of is elevator pitch. Apparently, at some point in Hollywood history, desperate screenwriters would try to follow some famous movie producer or director into an elevator where they're trapped in this box with him, and they had about 20 or 30 seconds while they're in the elevator to pitch their idea for their movie. Now, their movie may be brilliant with dynamic characters, and everything makes perfect sense. But if those screenwriters were unable to project that idea in 20 seconds or 30 seconds, then it doesn't matter. And as someone who works in the media, I have to tell you that we can talk all day about how evil globalism is, how amazing the opportunities provided by the fourth political theory are, which are very freeing. But if we don't create that elevator pitch, it's going to be rough. Because really, that elevator pitch also applies to not only some people in the masses, right? But to the elite, because the elite's also overwhelmed, overworked. They are too busy to listen to it. One thing that I have to say about the media, that a lot of times people don't understand, especially intellectuals. When you talk about the importance of movies, video games, all media on the mentality of people, usually intellectuals scoff, oh, movies are stupid, we don't watch movies. But movies, media, news really create the narrative by which we live by. And it's going to be very hard to challenge people who are bombarded every day by media narratives, be they games, be they movies, be they websites, be they the mainstream media. No matter how much people like to laugh at CNN and Fox News as being the dinosaur media, they still overall generate the dominant media narrative of every historical event happening right now. So you can laugh at them all you want, but they're still winning, and we're ultimately losing. Furthermore, at pretty much every university in the Western world, there's going to be some sort of, gender studies degree or some liberal programs. You have a liberal professor who gets $100,000 a year to sit and think and overthink everything and project that onto a conveyor belt of ever-increasing students. We have, if we're going to try to make change, we have from a media, from an information, from a narrative standpoint, this elevator pitch standpoint, we have one heck of a battle in front of us. And that battle is really with two factors. The subconscious of the audience, because again, as I said, the media needs to orient itself to the subconscious, to feelings. For example, a great elevator pitch for Marxism is, well, there's these capitalists. They're evil, they control everything. If we overthrow them, seize the means of productions, fantastic, then everyone is happy. That's simple, dumb, overtly dumb, but it's inspiring to a lot of people, okay? That's something that we need for the fourth political theory, something that really just breaks through and is understandable very quickly. But that has to come probably later, again, when this invitation has to be turned into an offer. I'd like to say that I respected what Levon had to say about creating something more understandable as the core, as the subject of the fourth political theory, because the family is something we all understand. We all come from a family, be it a good one, bad one, or other. I would offer that I think that mentality is really the glue that holds a society together, and I think mentality is what really, basically, long story short, I really see tribalism, human tribalism, as a main factor in the way our actions occur in our lives, and that the solution to that that goes beyond the race or class or individual factors of the other three theories is mentality. But that's more abstract. So if we put these two ideas on some sort of pedestal, going back to the family sounds better. So in a lot of ways, unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know, there's a pragmatic question that has to be answered. What are we going to do? How are we going to promote this? Again, there's a term of Christian apologetics. Well, apologetics could apply to everything. When you get to the media, apologetics become talking points. Pre-made answers to every possible question. Do we have a set of talking points for the fourth political theory? No. Do we have the money to project those via some news network or film or whatever onto the populace? No, because with Levon's idea about family, family's great, but every comedy show over the last 30 or 40 years always has the father is stupid, the mom is the hero, the children bring misery to the parents. They all project these liberal ideas, and it's very hard to compete against that when people have been raised from the cradle to the grave on this other mentality. So I don't mean to be a downer. I have probably the most pessimistic statement to make. I mean, obviously it's possible it's possible to make changes, but it's a very, very rough road ahead.
Thank you, dear team. So that is that is very nice. From Russia, the appeal to make something concrete, practical, very American, I like that, because we like that. We Russians sometimes like this practical attitude toward the things. Thank you very much. I appreciate very much your opinion. Now we are coming to Eastern Europe, time zone of Eastern Europe. It's time of Eastern Europe, and I would like to introduce Serbian philosopher, another heroic woman that stayed strong during all the globalist attack against the poor and sacrificed great sacred Serbia. Babana Anželjković, please.
Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation, Professor Dugin. Thanks to everyone to attention. I would like to first, as someone who follows Heideggerian concept of language and the importance of language, I would like first to make two remarks about the language. One of them is the using of language. Dobro večer iz Srbije, dobri večer iz Srbiji. Salam alaikum to my Persian and Arab friends. Hola to Spanish and Portuguese or Latin American friends. And for those from Western world, I really do not care very much. First of all, they should get informed about how their countries broke all their laws, local laws and international laws connected to Serbia and Serbian people during the at least 20 years, if not more. First of language remarks would be that we are under the silent Western occupation, all of us, the Western occupation which is based in Vatican, and the English language is the new Latin. But Latin was more developed than English language, which doesn't have any shapes for example, genders, as Latin had. So English language had to promote political correctness in using gender, because their language is not developed enough that they have separate forms for male, female, or neutral gender, as for example, some Roman, Slavic languages have, or some other languages in the world. Political correctness is simply derived from the simpleness of English language, and that is our fault who accepted all of that. That is the introduction, and I would start with important things about fourth political theory now. Plato's disciple Aristotle said that there are two kinds of wisdom. One of them is theoretical, which is Sophia, and the other is practical, which is phronesis. Phronesis guides human beings' activities in some rightful manner and in accordance with virtues. Phronesis is toward Aristotle rather intellectual than moral virtue, because it is rather achieved by instructions, not by the practice. But without phronesis, the practicing of moral virtues cannot be done in a proper way. So the concept of phronesis, if applied to the order in some country, may show us that the country's chosen political attitudes are in accordance with the well-being of its people. The three earlier political theories may be even proclaimed as acts of phronesis, but without a moral virtue, and that cannot be accepted by the people. They lack moral virtue because they misuse sovereignty, which is given to the country by its people. It can be even said that all those three political theories and on organization of the state deliberately misuse the sovereignty given by people and produce huge propaganda in order to protect its own wrongdoings. They try to persuade people that their rights on sovereignty of a country are transferred to people who know, but they're actually misused and transferred to the certain groups which seize the power and misuse the state apparatus for certain particular interests of the limited castes, groups, and political gangs. The people from which sovereignty is derived are excluded, misused, and deceived. Serbia is an ancient country. It has been through various kinds of state organization through its history, from principality to empire and kingdom, and now to the republic. In its very long history, Serbia was stretching on the three seas, from Adriatic, Mediterranean, and Ionian, during our great Tsar Dusan. Then it had to fight against false narratives and false Western produced history about Kosovo battle. Then it was occupied by Ottomans, then liberated. Then it fought some local and global wars. Then it was free and was one of the main leaders in anti-colonial activities against Nazism and fascism. It also happened that Serbia had liberalism and a form of pro-Western communism. Now Serbia is again occupied, but not by the Turks, Ottoman Turks, but by the Western gang. I deliberately said gang. It's now exposed to the new kind of Western Nazism and so-called Fourth Reich, the euphemism for the unity of European Union, NATO, World Bank, IMF, and global NGO sector. So this is the pattern. I'm thanking you all very much, and I'm very happy if I contributed in every way, and I still think that Western world should be ashamed.
Thank you very much, dear Governor. Now we are coming to Poland. Another, I think, an unexpected speaker that will be Mateusz Piskorski. We're trying to destroy the prejudices about how the people deal with each other. So please, Mateusz, it's the panel is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to have an opportunity to participate in today's online conference. Of course, we won't be talking about geopolitics, although I think that Alexander Gilewicz perfectly knows that personally me and the people who somehow support me here in Poland almost totally agree with you and with the Russian point in geopolitics as well. Anyway, let's focus on the thought political theory. I have planned a short speech about the Polish propositions of some Polish historical figures and thinkers who could be useful also for our friends from other cultures, other civilizations. However, due to the rules and regulations when it comes to time limit of today's conference, I will just focus on a few remarks. Some of those remarks come from my friends, from the academics here in Poland, which are very interested in thought political theory. Just a few days I have visited Professor Andrzej Walicki, who is, I think, the best, the most known, already 90 years old professor and academic and researcher on the Russian philosophical thought. But we are also discussing the thought political theory as he knows the concept and he knows the works of Alexander Gilewicz. We have also discussed some definitions, and well, his question, as well as questions from some classic academical circles here in Poland, but not only in Poland, are the questions about the definitions. So shouldn't we think of liberalism as a doctrine which is actually springing from the roots of a certain civilization, which would mean that we could accept liberalism only in several places in the world, let's say in the Anglo-Saxon civilization. That's the first question. The second question is about the difference between liberalism, I mean the classical liberalism, let's say, of John Stuart Mill and even Adam Smith, let's say, and the contemporary neoliberalism, which could be rather labeled as globalism. Yes? I'm talking about that because these are some questions about the definitions. We could find similar questions about the definition of second and third political theory, as also fascism and communism are not, let's say, too precisely described, and there are some conflicts about the definitions and terms as well. But nevertheless, as for liberalism, I personally think that perhaps it could be more useful to think about another name for the doctrine, for the Weltanschauung we deal with now. Perhaps it could be globalism, perhaps it could be neoliberalism, just not to exclude the liberals, the small group of classic liberals which still exist in the world, from our debates and discussions. It was just a short remark. When it comes to other thoughts I have, first and foremost, we should trace within the thought political theory, I think, the roots of degeneration. I mean, to find the identity of each civilization, let's say of the Slavic civilization or of the Western Slavic civilization, although I think that there was a time where Eastern, Southern, and Western Slavs were following the same civilizational path. Nevertheless, to find out our identity, to search our identity effectively, we have to find the roots of degeneration. In case of Poland, I would like to mention two thinkers on which we could elaborate in the future, perhaps in the future conferences or articles. It's Jan Stachniuk, who is already known also in Russia. I think Professor Dugin knows him and his works, who criticized Catholicism as the first, let's say, endeavor to mentally colonize Poland and Polish people, and to disturb the identity of Polish people as Slavic people. So that was the first, let's say, mental religious colonization, according to him. Then we have had several other attempts to colonize the minds and mentality or the national character of Polish people, as well as other Western Slavic nations. And the latest one is, of course, this globalism or neoliberalism, however we call that. And it is the most artificial one, I think, because if we look at even Catholicism before, even communism before, it's somehow adjusted to local traditions, which means that on the one hand, they were, of course, alien doctrines for the Slavic people, for the Polish people as well. But on the other hand, they have, let's say, preserved some elements, some small pieces of local Slavic tradition. When it comes to neoliberalism, as we see it in all all Eastern and Central European countries, I think it's the most artificial doctrine which has ever been imposed in our region and on our countries. And this is the difference, and this makes for all of us possible, particularly now in times of crisis, to think about coming back, returning to our true identity as Slavic people, using a huge, let's say, amount of works and thoughts, also of Russian Slavophiles movement from the 19th century. That could be also quite useful. So, well, what I think is the most important now for the followers and for all those who support the ideas of fourth political theory is to create a methodology of reconstructing the identities which have been already lost and which are now degenerated by several waves of different alien doctrines trying to impose their own Weltanschauung, alien Weltanschauung on people from all different civilizations. It's a purely methodological question we should answer to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Mateusz. I would like very shortly answer very important theoretical questions. So first of all, I think that I recommend that Kees van der Pijl. I will send the link about the text about Lockean Heartland. So this author, Kees van der Pijl, has followed how the liberalism, who was originally specialized, put in the context with the concrete space in Scotland, how this heartland of liberalism was little by little expanded to the boundaries of the planet. So that is very interesting, a very concrete, very argumented analysis of how locality became universality, how the small Weltanschauung, world vision of the part of the English population, Brittany was much greater, little step by step, overwhelmed all the England, and after that with British Empire, all the world. So that is the concrete study of that show the way, all the way from locality, of liberalism as locality to liberalism as universality. So now we are all the part of this Lockean heartland. Next point about the name. There is certain transformation, metabolism of liberalism. Now we are present because now the liberalism destroys some principles of early liberalism, but still it follows the main power line. So that is very, very special dialectic, and we need to concentrate maybe in the future more on that. That is important. The ideology and deconstruction and the history of liberalism is extremely important as methodological weapon of first political theory. I agree, we need to concentrate more academic efforts on that. So we need to reconstruct the idea and deconstruct idea of liberalism to show what is the same in modern days global liberalism and globalism and what is new, and make a kind of comparison. But why we use liberalism? Because liberalism has won over fascism and communism to the end of the previous century. So that is something concrete. It is not only just abstraction, but we need to answer all these questions, developing the discourse. Now in my list there is the Western Europe, but I don't see either Princess Victoria. She was here, and in my list it's her turn to take the panel.
Oh, dear Alexander. I've been following with great interest this wonderful conference. You did a technical feat as well, to have over 100 people on the same at the same time all together. Well, in an anti-globalist conference is really magnificent. It was very, very interesting to follow our friends from the East. Pepe, of course, as usual, was stunning, and we are very close to our Lebanese friends, because the resistance is our resistance as well. The Mediterranean would not be able to overlive without a strong Lebanon. So we have to really express our gratitude to them for their fights and to support them in any possible way. In fact, I was thinking when I received your email and the subject of the conference, you know, of course, we've been talking about it, about all of this in Sicily when you came over for my think tank in Beirut, and the thing when we met in Moldavia, and I suddenly had a vision, which was the fact that, you see, one thing that unites us, all of us, is the fact that we were all identified in Chebrovsky manual, what used to be called the Pentagon map, as countries that were not globalized. It was difficult to globalize us. Two groups of countries were taken into consideration. Ones were the ones in the, let's say, in the so-called third world, and the others were in the so-called civilized world. And as you know, Chebrovsky had an idea of how to tackle the ones and the others in a different way. In substance, what we are seeing now is the result of the whole strategy that was thought in those years, and which is perennial chaos. Perennial chaos for those countries that cannot be controlled from the inside. So this perennial chaos, we've seen it's developing through the so-called colored revolutions all over the Middle East, all over Africa, etc., etc. And the Mediterranean is striking a balance. Of course, North Africa is brought into chaos, whereas the northern part of the Mediterranean is somehow resisting. Well, as a southerner, as you know, I'm Sicilian, and we are very much in the middle of all this. We are witnessing the dramatic arrival of the migrants every single day, and behind it we know that these merchants, death merchants, paid by Soros. We know the entire strategy which is behind this operation. And we know somehow that our resistance is not an organized resistance. I mean, there are a few people who try to resist, to explain what is going on. At the same time, we are very human. These are our neighbors. We don't want them to drown. So it's mixed feelings and mixed reactions. And what does this depend from? This depends from the fact that we are unorganized countries. The Mediterranean is very well known for being disorganized. It doesn't obey orders. Europe is adamant about the fact that we don't obey orders. We are not structured in the way they want. We are not creating cheese exactly the shape and the size they want. We don't react to the financial problems as they want to impose it upon us. So we are somehow the example of countries that have no chance. We are the southern Mediterranean, the southern European countries with no hope of progress, no hope of development, and certainly we still hang on to families. So we're not going to wear a microchip on in our skin next month. We're not going to be vaccinated within 3 months. We're not going to establish this tremendous systems of, as you know, that have been developed in Sweden, but that they are now the law, according to United Nations, concerning child sexuality, androgynous sexuality. We are not going to blow up families. Of course, as Lee once said, the family is still in our countries a structure which is essential. So all of this, all these hopeless cases that we are, our decadence, our disorganization, our traditional way of life are, according to me, already a fourth political theory. I mean, they are the application of a form of resistance which is common to all. I mean, it is common to us, to the Lebanese, to the Latin Americans, to the Indians. We are like this. We refuse a mentality which is based on organization and the idea of progress. This is something that is within us. It's been up to now considered a hang-up. I mean, it's been considered a great backlash according to the elites, of course. No hope for success, no hope for progress, and decadent countries with no future. Well, I think that in this precise moment, this is our future, this is our strength. So let's develop these elements. We have to recognize them no longer as things that we have to change in the future. Let's not obey to all the systems that United Nations laws, that EU laws are trying to establish. Let's accept the fact that we are considered chaotic, disorganized, whatever. Well, they never use the word traditional, but certainly decadent in some ways, and turn all of this into our power. I think this is the basis of action that we have to take. Pepe was asking, what shall we start from? Let's start from something. Well, I think that the thing we have to start from is this, is a strong reaction to these organization processes. They are planning to organize everything in our lives. We've seen it now with the virus. Things have become even more, even stronger from this point of view. But here, for instance, in Sicily, you go around and people kiss you, and nobody wears a mask, and we have no problems. I mean, the virus was practically not present here, and people refuse to keep a distance from each other. People refuse to adapt to a totally neutral way of life where your neighbor is an enemy who could be killing you through a virus. So this is our strength. And this is something on which your theory is based, because it's based on traditional culture. And traditional culture is no longer a negative aspect, but it's seen, everybody can witness the fact that it's very positive. We are going to react. During the whole lockdown, well, people exchanged videos, they were sending messages, everybody started understanding what was happening. Italians understood that they were being manipulated, and they understood normal people would go in the streets and complain about what was happening. So non-politicized, very normal people would understand. So the thought, this idea that you are talking about, this is what was now alive. It is alive, it's there. So this is the moment we choose. The thing, the operation, whatever, I don't know whether it was organized. Many people say the virus was organized or whatever. Even if it was organized, it's in our areas, in the areas of all our friends around here participating to the conference, in these countries, somehow the project has not had the consequences, the exact consequences that they were expecting. It has awakened people's minds. Something has come to people's minds that they've understood that something is going on. They've understood that that it's a war, that it's a hidden war, and that we have to react, and that our reaction is vital for the planet. So, Alexandra, I think you've had this fantastic idea of organizing this first international Zoom conference, and we have to stick to this. We have to sort of organize a network and go on with this organization and keep in touch and try to develop in every country through all our friends participating to the project. We have to develop our local autonomous reactions. Of course, each of us we all have different problems. We've heard everybody's problems, and we know how dramatic they are all over the world. But the fact that we know each other, that we can communicate, and that we can react in the same way is, I think, very an element of great strength. So thank you, Alexander, for this fantastic opportunity, and let's go on with the project.
Thank you, dear Victoria, for your splendid speech. Victoria, she is great princess, the real princess, living in the real castle, the big palace, the wonderful magical palace, and the wonderful magical earth, the land of Sicily that should be independent and multipolar. That should be the pole of the world, I think. So that is really great, and I think we have some common project in the arts, in some intellectual exchange, and I think that we are coming to something concrete. So from conference like that, we are coming to creating more and more large networks of the people sharing the same values finally, and fighting to the same principles. So I think that Sicily, Poland, Georgia, Pakistan, Lebanon, Turkey, Russia, that is Serbia, everywhere we have the same threats. We have the same principles to defend, and I think that is really great. Thank you very much. And I think we could as well to think about making some such kind of conferences in Italian, for example, inviting more Italian public, or in French, inviting more French, or in the Spanish for Latin America and Spain and Portugal. So we should go further, and today we have a very special women as speakers. All of them are beautiful, all of them are heroic, and that is this. We could write about the fight of the Victoria fight against the mafia. She's the only one person in Italy that has won the mafia, that wanted to have to take away her palace. So that is the great example how one person of the royal, with royal blood and royal soul and royal spirit could win the huge plebeian structures of counter-initiated basis alone, almost alone with the French. So I'm really happy that Princess Victoria is with us. Thank you very much. Now, now we are coming to the France, to other world, other civilization, other continent, and I would like to give the speech to Laurent James, Laurent. He is my old friend, and he is this follower of our common friend Jean Parvulescu. He is one of the rarest people in the world who is interested in this unknown but very great figure as Jean Parvulescu, Eurasianist, Romanian, mystical, Guénonian, postmodernist writer that is so actual, so great. So I cannot stop wondering why nobody knows him. We have made the first translation of his books from not only from French to the Russian. That was the first foreign translation of works of Jean Parvulescu, but we have promoted the first translation of Romanian author Jean Parvulescu into the Romanian. That with the help of my our friend Yuri Roshka. So please, Laurent, it's up to you.
So thank you very much, Professor Dugin. Yes, we can say that in a way, Jean Parvulescu, who was a poet, a writer, and a philosopher, in a way, his thoughts were the germs of the fourth political theory. And we have created the Jean Parvulescu Committee. Jean Parvulescu died 10 years ago, and the project of this committee is of course, it is it follows the thoughts of Jean Parvulescu himself. It is the union of the peoples of Eurasian continents in the revival of the civilizing Christian faith, and the concept of the Third Rome may be fundamental to the development of such a project. This theme has been the backbone of all the thinking of Jean Parvulescu, both poetic and geopolitical, asserted in the course of his numerous texts and works. The major political events of our time are all concerned directly through spirituality, and more, as we think that politics is nowadays getting completely rid of ideology. There is no ideology today in politics. And that's the reason why geopolitics today becomes more and more important. And as wrote Jean Parvulescu in 2005, geopolitics transcendental is indeed a revolutionary mystic in action. And to do this, we have to impose the return of the living sacred within the imperial community of the great continent. The empire is the natural structure of any community organization. It is based on the principle of subsidiarity. Everything that can be regulated politically from the bottom must be regulated from the base. And the people are the base, I believe, of the fourth political theory. It is the natural communities themselves who govern their own organization, the economy of their territory. The principle of empire is that of supreme unity at the top and supreme heterogeneity at the bottom. We find the spiritual principle, we believe, of fourth political theory, which is linked to an organic logic of people's lives, and which makes an empire naturally linked to the notion of civilization. No one and no people should be identified or identify themselves with imperial power. Imperial power is not the attribute of a given nation, but a divine attribute lent and taken away from the sovereign. And his sole purpose is to serve the communities. No European country, no European nation has inherited the empire of Rome. It is the church itself which inherited it, as Soloviev well explained in his work, Russia and the Universal Church. The church is one and indivisible, both universal in space and permanent in time. And the empire and the church are indissolubly linked to each other. This is what Dante demonstrates with superb clarity in De Monarchia. Early Christianity from the first Rome was as much Catholic as it was Orthodox. In Gaul country, it was a Celtic Christianism thanks to the establishment of an ecclesia, a community of believers, by Joseph of Arimathea after his arrival in Gaul in the middle of the 1st century, and before he evangelized Great Britain. Some authors have developed a very interesting point of view, according to which the schism of the year 1054, this schism was not the result of a progressive gap between Latins and Greeks, but it was the product of the policy of the Franks imposed on the popes and on the Celtic Christian monasticism. And I would like to precise that at the same period of the colonization of Africa and of Asia, you had also an internal colonization of Western communities. Western communities in France and in Italy, I believe, were the first communities in the world to be colonized by globalism. Today, I strongly believe that there is no other project for European Christianity to be restored, as the enemy we all face is the worldwide conspiracy against the Virgin Mary. And this restoration directly resonates with the notion of the Third Rome, in the sense that the Third Rome is also the Third Russia. As Vyacheslav Ivanov in his comments of Dostoevsky said, after Tsarist Russia and after Bolshevik Russia, here comes the Russia of the reign of Christ and the Holy Spirit. I know personally many political groups deeply rooted in French regions, French mountains, in Corsica also, which are deeply engaged to restore their identity within the European civilization, not in a way to cut from it, because I think that it would be it would come with the will of globalism. Total independency of European regions is silly, I would say. But to be autonomous within European civilization, I believe it would be a great application of fourth political theory in the Western world. Thank you very much, Professor Dugin.
Thank you very much, dear Laurent. It's very interesting to think about the future of Europe. So everything every word we say about Europe, so we are against globalism, against global elites. We are against status quo, but we have no image, and there is a wrong image of populism. I think that is nationalism. So I am totally in favor of creation of the great European kind of empire, or kind of great empire of the end, as Jean Paul Lesca said, but with the multiplicity and diversity of the regional identity, where Corsicans, Sicilians, North Italians, the people from, that would be greater Switzerland. My idea is to organize the independent community at the base of the concrete society. So that is just a dream, but we need to have a dream. I think that's important. We have to have a dream. Without the dream, we will have no future. So I agree with you absolutely. So we need to as well to have an image of the future of alternative Europe. And when we are dealing with nationalists, so we are rather in favor of them, because they are fighting against liberal elite, but they lack the project. They just are using the same old versions, all the dead ends. We need to totally different vision of future, and I think that the community, the people of Europe, should be restored in their originality and in their existential territories and spaces. So thank you very much. Now I would like to give the word to representative of Austria, the young intellectual Alexander Markovich, who as well, who is working with the project actively of translation in German, some text of Noomachia that was initially made in Belgrade. So now Noomachia, first political theory, and Eurasianism unites not only Russia and Europe, but the people and the culture of Europe as well. So please, Alexander, it's up to you.
First, thank you very much for the possibility to participate here in these talks. We're living in interesting times. Whereas the coronavirus proves that open borders and open society are fragile, the power of the nation states seems to grow against the trend of globalization. As fourth political theory shows, the reign of the bourgeois individual, which is the subject of modernity and liberalism, is still ruling supreme. In Europe, where the individual was born, egoism, idiotism, and selfish interests of the nation state are not only a problem for the globalist project of European Union, but also make the emergence of Europe as a spiritually independent civilization impossible. But how can we overcome this main problem of individualism and liberalism in the West itself? As the European New Right and Professor Dugin highlighted, the second and third political theory of Marxism, communism, and nationalism, fascism were not able to eliminate individualism and modernity because they were themselves precisely a product of this moment in Noomachia. Fascism and Marxism too were based on the individual, the poor individual in Marxism and the chauvinistic bourgeois in fascism. Therefore, an alternative cannot arise from these ideologies. But if you look, on the other hand, at the traditionalist, non-individualist Europe, which existed before the advent of modernity, we can clearly see the idea of the Holy Empire, which stands in total opposition to the concept of the nation state and the individual, as an inspiration for a future European order after liberalism. The Austrian proponent of the conservative revolution, who is often called the teacher of conservative revolution, Ottmar Spahn, theorized in his works the idea of the estate state and therefore empire as an alternative to liberalism and fascism. Also, Spahn identifies individualism as the main problem of modernity and proposes his own concepts of universalism as new mode of government. But what does he mean by universalism? Spahn definitely does not mean the idea of a universalist world state or one idea colonizing the whole world, but a concept of whole consisting out of parts in opposition to the idea of atomization and individualism. So please don't block me. Instead of individuals, Spahn's idea of empire is built on the estates. In ancient European civilization, there were three estates: priests, warriors, and peasants. So they existed in the Holy Roman Empire. Above them ruled the Christian emperor, who held the position of katechon in order to prevent the arrival of the Antichrist. As the famous figure of the Quaternionenadler shows, a picture of the imperial eagle consisting of the different countries and the states of the empire is not one centralized whole, but a whole consisting of several parts. Its composition is gradual, not equal. Whereas the individualistic nation state is always centralized according to Spahn and has no place for other organizations, the universalistic state, which is Spahn's name for the empire, is federalized and hierarchical. Its basis is the idea of the community, since thoughts inside the single human can only be evoked through another spirit and the community. Spahn calls this phenomena the Gezweiung, which is in his view the precondition of Dasein. And the Gezweiung consists out of parts completing each other. Common examples for this are child and mother, leaders and guided people. If the Gezweiung grows and encompasses even bigger circles of humans, they are called Gezweiungskreise. And as soon as they are forming their own organizations, they are finally becoming estates. As the estates form an organic community, they are neither totally homogeneous nor marked by an incompatible diversity, but they are between these two poles. The estates are furthermore part of a whole and serve this wholeness, which is society. But an estate is only then a full estate if it becomes organized. A society is, according to Spahn, first and foremost a spiritual being. All Gezweiungskreise from the areas of religion, philosophy, science, art, and sensuousness are of special importance. Since the spirituality is substantial, every state must be perceived as spiritual state. Interestingly, Spahn didn't see the West in the interwar period as a lost cause, since according to him, a totally atomistic society isn't possible, and therefore these acting estates can still be seen in the societies of the West. The hierarchy inside the state is derived from the value of the certain estates. 3 main stages of spirituality, according to Spahn, from bottom to the top. Sensual, vital spirituality, craftsmen, peasants. Higher spirituality, artisans and lower spiritual workers. And creative spirituality, state leaders and military leaders. The biggest danger for this hierarchy in the eyes of Spahn is alienation between the estates. How to prevent this? Steadily cooperation between estates to keep up the estate state. The estates are super relevated to the state. Therefore, the estates can only come into contact with each other through the state. This process of super elevation makes a decentralized state possible. Therefore, the state becomes the highest estate and has special tasks to fulfill. Foreign policy, governments, the army, state education. And to come to an end, as we can see, there's this important element of the states, which can actually overcome individualism and is a kind of guide in order to solve the problem of the nation state. And also the idea of empire, as Alain de Benoit writes, just very short, is also a solution in order to overcome the problem of the other, because the estates and the ideal community inside the empire actually give us the possibility to unite the other and to accept it as the other. So therefore, I suggest for the construction of 4PT in Europe a closer examination of Ottmar Spahn's thoughts and the concepts of the estates and empire.
I think that that is a very important point. Ottmar Spahn is one of the central author with Schmitt, Carl Schmitt, for the development of fourth political theory. I agree absolutely. He is a bit forgotten. I have 30 years ago, I have found closed archives of KGB, the text, very interesting, very unique text of Ottmar Spahn taken from from the Europe by Soviet army. Very interesting, and Ottmar Spahn as well is important because he speaks about the estates. Estates as primordial in organizing, in imagining the future of the Europe, of the world. We need to reconsider the concept of Platonic triadic construct of the soul with the head, the heart, and the belly. That coincides with 3 main estates. But bourgeois, weren't bourgeois. The bourgeois weren't third estate. The peasantry was. So we have dedicated to that many seminars in Russia, and I think that you have reminded us, dear Alexander, very important author on that. So we should at least make the kind of some articles dedicated to Ottmar Spahn. It is really of high importance, because if we think about the future, we need to take inspiration from the past. And Ottmar Spahn, he is forgotten representative of conservative revolution and a very important author. Thank you very much. Now we. I would like to introduce Luca Seniscalco. I would like to say that Luca Seniscalco is one of the best representatives of new Italian generation of intellectuals. I have met him some years ago in Italy, and with Andrea Scarabelli, Francesca Marotta, as long as I could say, he represents the best intellectual youth of Italy, traditionalists, with very deep knowledge of the problem of radical subject, of fourth political theory. He has written the introduction to my translation of fourth political theory in Italian. So please, Luca, it's up to you.
So greetings from Italy, and first of all, I would like to thank Professor Dugin for these generous words and for the invitation to take part to this conference, and also the great scholar and friend Jeff Arnold. I think that the perspectives that emerge from this conference are really interesting, and I would like to give some remarks about the concept of subject and the big philosophical problem of the death of subject in the contemporary era. In this era, and for this problem, I think a really important author that Professor Dugin has studied and many times quoted is surely Julius Evola, the famous traditionalist thinker that can be defined as a kind of traditionalist without tradition, quoting this image by Dugin that expresses the greatest tragedy of modern and postmodern human condition. I start from this image, the one of traditionalist without tradition, because I will focus my brief presentation of one of the most significant aspects, that is at least my opinion, of the fourth political theory, that is the role of the man, that is the role of the subject in the new ages. This topic has also been touched in previous speeches, and my perspective will be especially philosophically oriented. I think that we can nowadays speak about the concept of the death of man, that is more precisely the death of the modern subject, the subject that has been imagined by secularized men, theoretically conceived by René Descartes, as brilliantly pointed out by Martin Heidegger, and then enter in the common imagination, in the sensus communis. We can now, in the postmodern age, recognize the rising of a plurality of subjects as theorized through the figure of dividuum, as indicated by Dugin himself. The dividuum is the paradoxical man in the postmodern age, that is the divisible, splittable individuum. And this is a paradox because the individuum, the main character of the modern age, is what cannot be divided. But now we live in an age in which the new subject, the new character, is as a kind of simulacrum of the individuum. So a dividuum has been theorized, for example, in postmodern era by philosophers such as Deleuze and Guattari, conceived then through the concept of rhizoma, and enter in the common imagination through the character of the completely not identitarian man, that is gender fluid, cultural fluid, mobile, without relations neither from an horizontal level, so with other men and communities, nor from a vertical level, with sky and gods, we could say, referring to a traditional perspective or a philosophy of sacred, such as the one, for example, that emerges in the philosophical text of Heidegger when he speaks about the Geführt. And this phenomenology that shows that after the death of God is necessary that also man dies is broadly considered and explained in the fourth political theory. In these few minutes, I just want to point out the importance of this aspect of political theory. As explained by classics, by Plato, for example, no political transformation can take place without a convergent anthropological modification. But here comes the question, the philosophische Frage, we could say. How is it possible to achieve man transformation if we have a fixed natural substance that can be rationally and universally understood on an ontological, scientific, biological, neuroscientific level. This is the modern perspective in which all man is equal to the other, and so no modification can really happen within ourselves. So this option in modernity is not available. But here comes the tragic but rich opportunity of postmodernism. The nihilistic disruption of modern man, the thesis that no ontological substance exists, and also the subjectivistic foundation of modern knowledge, is theoretically doomed to fall, opens never-ending perspectives of man reconstruction. Here, we should develop that free and plural postmodernity of multiple civilizations enlightened by some of the previous speeches. Here, postmodernity touches paradoxically archaic traditions. Men are not fixed and static individuals, but polarized processes, energetic points of the wool, of the one word, the hermetic wool, that can transform themselves as microcosm in relation to the macrocosm. What we need to imagine, therefore, and the fourth political theory gives pivotal instructions toward these objectives, is not the conservation of the anthropological identity of the modern subject, but the brave openness to that metaphysical origin in which everything can be found, and from which every form proceeds. Therefore, the new subject that actually needs to overcome subject and object to stand as a sacred post-subject, adopting the postmodern language, can be more easily researched in the postmodern horizons. It is also important to remember that man transformation cannot be guided by the subjectivistic and willing rational attitude of man that is typically modern, as it was an easy and direct act of deterministic decision. This was the idea surrounding the concept of homo novus, the new man, desired by the first three political theories. It is a Luciferian, Promethean, and Titanic ideal. This topic is really complex, and we can't say too much, but as Heidegger pointed out, it is fundamental to develop the what he called the disposition, the openness, in order to let the event, the ereignis of the appearance of the new subject manifest by itself. This aspect, I think, is coherent with the perspective showed at the beginning of this conference by Professor Akram, when he quoted Lao Tse and Muslim tradition, explaining something that I think is really similar to this point. Therefore, the Dasein, that is the core of the fourth political theory, and the radical subject, that is a eschatological projection, could be understood through the dark light of Dugin's metaphysics of chaos, and also thanks to a long philosophical tradition concerned about the concept of person, personality, the so-called personalism that has already tried to overcome the individualism. And here comes again, in my opinion, the importance of Julius Evola and this theory of absolute individuality that maybe is better to translate as absolute person in this path. And this is the important link that, in my point of view, can unify the metapolitical and political activism, the spiritual orientation, and the philosophical perspectives in this huge cultural project of the fourth political theory. And I finish, and I thank you, everyone.
Thank you, De Luca, very much. So I think that's important it is very important problem subject, because in fourth political theory, there is no traditional subject. Everything we know about the man, about the human being, it is biased by three pre-existing political theories. So it is biased by political modernity. We could not imagine, we could not speak, think, or act with human being, with men, outside of this matrix, or outside of this epistemological mapping that totally depends from Western political modernity. So first political theory, it is about to get beyond the limits of this Cartesian subject. And I think you correctly mentioned, you have correctly mentioned Evola and many other orientation. It is not so clear at all, because if we understand how great impact, how deep impact the political modernity and modernity in general has made on our brains, so the main thing of decolonization, the liberation of our brain, it is the greatest anthropological challenge. So I think you're absolutely right. We should put the problem of subject in the center of the concern in developing and imagining, offering, as Tim Kirby has suggested, in the offer of the first political theory, there should be anthropological offer of alternative subject. And that is not so easy it could look like. So thank you very much. It is very really very important. So now I would like to give this speech to Vavra Suk from Sweden about maybe more actual topic, Corona pandemic and European populism. But sometime it's necessary.
Thank you very much. It's so interesting listening to all these people from different continents. So greetings from Sweden. Thank you, Professor Dugin, for allowing me to say a few words. I will be quite brief because I want to hear more from all the other interesting people here. So I will give you one recent example here about liberalism from Sweden. In the main newspaper, there was an article, it was a news article, not an opinion piece, that said that since people in Nigeria are having many children and the Swedish people are not having so many children, Nigeria will solve the future for Sweden because they will move to Sweden and replace the non-existent Swedish children. And that's kind of the core of liberalism. We are reduced to workforce, to consumers. We are exchangeable for the liberal people, for the liberal ideas. We are nothing more. We don't have a culture, or we are exchangeable. But in a way, it's a good thing that liberals reveal their views so everyone can see what they want. Actually, I've written a small speech, but I will not really read it because we had an interesting chat here on the sidelines of this conference in the beginning about liberalism. What is liberalism? Cultural liberalism or market liberalism? Actually, we can, I think, all agree on globalism, the globalist idea. And Professor Dugin, in his opening remarks, mentioned that globalism is today in decay, that it has collapsed. And of course, the liberalists, the globalists, they understand this too. And that's how they are using this corona pandemics now. And several people mentioned this already, Levan Vasadze, Mr. Escobar, about the fourth rider of the doom now appearing on the scene. We are very quickly going into tyranny, a global dictatorship with the new normal, the Great Reset, that of course will not be good for ordinary people. And that's what we really have to look at now, because the liberalism will actually be no more. There will be a tyranny. Recently, Pompeo, the Secretary of State of US, attacked China in a speech saying that he promised regime change, saying that we have done it before. And these are strong words, but actually it's better for China and the rest of the world that they have an external enemy. They can see globalists and oppose it. It's kind of worse for us in Europe and Western world, because here people tend to think that it's something ingenious, something here, something that is a part of our civilization, a part of our culture, but actually it's not. It's destroying our culture. And fourth political theory, I think everybody has to resist in their own way where they are. And for me, I'm European, I live in Europe, so I fight for Western civilization, the true Western civilization, against liberalism. And I think Sweden is kind of an experimental country where all sort of crazy things happen, from feminism to, everything, multicultural. And individualism is also very strong in Sweden. I think that is the way to tackle liberalism and globalism also, about what matters for individual people, for their joy, their happiness. In Western world, in Sweden, there are many suicides and people feel alienated to each other. I mean, cats and dogs are now best friends to people, because there is no connection man to man, no connection between generations. We are told that we should not care for our old parents, and children are given away to daycare. So I will give you an example. Our organization offered some help to some friends to rent an apartment or help them what they needed, and they said no. They didn't want, and that's because they don't want to feel a debt to anyone, because next time they will need to help someone and they will not be free. And this freedom is really what liberalism is all about. This false sense of freedom is a prison, because everybody needs to be needed. Everybody needs to have these bonds to children, to friends, to parents, to family. And it's a human thing. I think that's how we can tackle it, because liberalism as its core is individualistic. And as Levan Vasadze said, family is the antidote. We should create really a policy for families that should strengthen the bonds, because that's how liberalism will be weakened. So that is actually my idea about how to do this, and I'm very intrigued about all the other speeches. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Vavra. So now we're more or less, I suggest to get out of our continent finally, to transcend Eurasia and to get to America, because some Asian people, it's too late for them to participate, and so the night is coming. Night is covering us more and more, but in America there is a day. If we could make all night and day, day-long conference, for example, having so many friends in different continents, we can make it without the end, a kind of passing from the place where there is, for example, already the evening, and speaking, it coming once more to the evening, so to the same point, same starting point. It is really wonderful.
Небо, земля, люди-боги и мы, распятые на кресте толкования.